When we're able to understand the emotional triggers that cause us to react to life challenges instead of responding to them, we give ourselves a better opportunity to claim actions and solutions that align with our own personal integrity. But let's have ourselves a pocket-sized pep talk, because when we understand what's behind uncomfortable emotions, we give ourselves the chance to be more resourceful and strategic and can reframe even some of the most difficult situations. Let's give it a try.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Andrea DeWitt, is an author, sought-after speaker, and dynamic leadership coach who teaches high-performing leaders to see and step into their power, potential, and truth. Her 2022 book, Name, Claim, and Reframe, Your Path to a Well-Lived Life, helps readers on a path to self-discovery, enabling them to access their personal power and potential in a way that aligns with their truth. Her new follow-up book, Name, Claim, and Reframe Workbook, Your Companion Guide to a Well-Lived Life, just hit the shelves April 30th and offers an in-depth introspective extension for readers to harvest their own insight using her NCR model. She'll explain that. Happy to have you back with us, Andrea, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob. It's always fun to talk to you. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, good. And when I say back with us, I want you to know, I think you're number 4 out of 350 that I've had on twice. So you're in a very small club. I call it the two-timer club, but it seems to offend people. But you're a two-timer, if that helps.
I'm very honored to be a two-timer on your podcast, Rob.
Well, there you go. All right. Pleasure to have you here. So let's dive in. The creation and release of this workbook was fast. Very fast. As an author, part of me was kind of jealous it was so fast. Was this part of the plan, or did you have an epiphany of some sort?
It wasn't part of the plan. This whole journey has been, it's caught me by surprise. It really has. When my initial book was released, it did so well. And I mean, I was a first-time author, and we got lots of notice. A national TV show noticed us, and it really made me think about, how is this content landing? And like you, I'm a trainer, so I'm always thinking about, okay, well, it's one thing to write it, but how are people receiving it, and how can I make this content more accessible, even more accessible to people? And so that's kind of how the workbook came to be. And what was so interesting, Rob, was that when I was doing trainings after the book was out, and I was doing salons and workshops, I learned things about the content that I hadn't thought about. And people were saying, well, I saw this and I saw this, and maybe we need to go into that. And I'm really interested in this. And so my publisher and I got together and said, hey, let's make a workbook, because this is an opportunity to put this content, name, claim, and reframe, into the hands of the reader, because that's really what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah,
About
it is. Yep.
helping people to understand, how does this fit in my life?
In my mind, kind of the perfect answer, because when we just sort of sit in a room and go, well, I woke up one morning and I thought this or that, as trainers, you can practice in front of a mirror, you can talk to a wall, whatever you want, until you actually go under fire, live fire, and get into a room and see what's landing and what isn't landing, what's sticking, what isn't sticking. It can be a great book. That doesn't mean it's a great training program yet. And so we learn so much, I call it ring work, just getting in the ring and sparring.
It was, and I was so excited to see, because there were things I had missed.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I thought I went into it, there were things I missed, and little corners that what I'm finding from just people that have looked at the workbook said, oh my goodness. And so I'm just excited to allow people to explore on their own, to see how this works for them, and really helping people to live more authentic lives, really, and calling in more responsive behavior than reactive behavior is kind of my buzzword,
Yeah.
or my buzz phrase.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, sort of, I think part of being an author, and maybe people don't understand, so we'll talk about this just for a second, is, and you're hearing it in Andrea's voice right now, is you see a book on a shelf, you see a book at Amazon, you see, boy, that must have taken a while to work. What you don't see is this gnawing passion of, it's like our children. It's more important than you imagine. We're thrilled that you love the words, and we're thrilled if it changed your life, but it changes our lives. And so don't be surprised in this conversation when you're listening to this author right now. Um, Put some passion behind these words. It's more than a book to us. It's sort of an extension. It's something we leave behind, and it's deep.
Thank you. It is deep. It is deep. We are, you're passionate about the work and you see how it's changed you, but I think you need to understand that it's not about you anymore. Once you write something and you put it out into the world, you don't own it anymore.
Right.
And I'm very humble about when people give me feedback, because I just take it, all of it, because it helps me to be a better writer, a better author, a better speaker, a better trainer, all of it. So anything that anybody has to share, I'm always grateful, because then I know how to make the message land more effectively to the audience.
Right. You're a better person than me. I have to tell you, I'm going to full disclosure, and Barrett Kohler knows this. This is our publisher. That I actually, once I've written a book, I'll take any criticism, feedback, and I shouldn't say criticism, feedback, pro or con, on a delivery, on training, on a keynote, on a workshop, you name it. Let me hear it. I'm trying to get it better. Once I've written a book, it's written. Unless I move to a second edition, it's sort of out there. So when you see Andrea, tell her how you really feel, up, down, sideways. She's thrilled. When you see me, hold the negative stuff in your pocket. I'll get it next book. And but that's me. And Barrett Kohler laughs about this because I'm one of the few authors there who they know. They won't even send out manuscripts to be read by readers for me, because they know I'm very sensitive about it. I'll take it from the editor. We're trying to make a great book. But the big thing is, once it's out, I'm a little more careful. And let me just grow one more thing. I want to crowbar something in, because you said something that's important. And when I say crowbar, at some point in this conversation, I'm always going to go to, if you like what you're hearing, why don't you go to Amazon and get the book? But more than that, feedback means a lot to writers. So love when you get the book. Means we read every comment, every comment. It's like having an ice cream sundae. It's really, really wonderful. So always get in the habit, if you read a book and you like that book, put a comment on there. You can bet that Andrea and Rob and the rest of us knuckleheads who are writing books really take it, and it means a lot to us. So this commercial is now over, but it means a lot. It's a wonderful thing to do.
Well, I mean, I actually have, you and I talked about this last time. I have a whole section in my book about reframing feedback, because feedback's one of the hardest things for us to take in. And if we can open our mind, again, it's about responding instead of reacting. If we can open our mind, oftentimes people see things that you don't see.
Yeah.
And it just can make you better. And I mean, I say this as a recovering warrior, Rob, because I wasn't very good. I converted every bit of feedback I used to into criticism. I didn't even listen. I closed off. And when I started doing this work, I started opening my mind and thinking, wow, there's perspectives here I hadn't thought of. And so I think that if we can check our ego at the door and open our hearts and our minds, we can learn a lot. And and the really cool thing about feedback, even like if you get a bad review or something, there's something in there that is interesting to know. Oh, well, that's interesting. This person has that perspective. Okay, do I care what that person thinks or not? If I do, I'm going to take it in. If I don't, I'm just going to throw it out. So you always have the power to sift and sort the feedback in any way you want.
Right. Well, thank you. I think part of that message was delivered right for Rob, right between the eyes. I hear you. And you know what it is? I'm cautious because I've done so many training programs in my life where I've seen, and I'm a student of watching other trainers, and I'm always anxious when I see a room that's turned over for feedback to an individual who may have given a presentation or done a report, and the question is, what did you all think? And it's, to me, it's not controlled enough. I want to start. I want to keep everything balanced. And if I could be assured that what the feedback that I'm receiving, or I know I can control at my training rooms, is balanced, I'm fine. But it's almost like malpractice when I see just, well, folks, what do you think? Because there's 10 presentations, one of them's, amazing, and one of them really needed some work, and 8 are in the middle. But we have you could crush another human being's spirit, particularly on public feedback in a room. That's why you're hearing me so cautious about feedback. I'm always anxious about how it's handled.
And I think you bring up such a good point though, Rob. I mean, it's like being naked on the first tee
Yeah.
when you're standing up there. And it's not fair, so targeting the feedback, asking what you want to know or what you're looking for can be a great way. But I mean, I actually did a Q&A once, and a woman came in and she was very angry about one of my tools. She didn't agree with how I had curated this particular tool, the balance your response, about masculine and feminine leadership traits. And she was really reactive and angry. And I thought, okay, this is a perfect time for me to model responding to her reaction. And I said, wow, thanks so much for that feedback. That's so helpful for me to know how this content's landing. Let me put the power back in your hands, because that's my interpretation, and you are more than welcome to take that particular leadership trait and move it over to the other side if you don't agree with me. I really appreciate your perspectives there. And I disarmed her
Hmm.
because I thought, you know what? What do I care what she thinks about how it? No, really, I don't.
Right.
But it gives me information about, well, maybe I was wrong. Some people aren't going to like it. And she was angry about it. She took offense to it. That's interesting feedback. And it prepared me again for the next time I did the talk, because that question could come up again.
Right.
So it's all, I don't know. You can see how I reframe everything, Rob. I'm always looking for an angle that I can twist it in a way that I'm going to find, expansiveness or positivity. I'm cautious, always cautiously optimistic about pretty much everything.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way, but I'm so affected. It's when I speak to you, it's like therapy. I really am listening, and I will tell you that I am such a knucklehead about sparing people's feelings in public that I actually am methodical. I've never spoken about this before, so anybody who takes a workshop from me will go, there, he's doing it. But if I have a workshop, and let's say a 2-day workshop, it's got to be a little bit longer for us not only to go through an icebreaker, but to really go around a small room of 18 to 20, let's say max, and let them tell us, who they are, where they're from, something interesting, whatever 3 or 4 questions we come up with. I am so methodical to be balanced in how much time I even spend with an individual, because I fear that I'll go, oh, Andrea, that's fascinating, and when and who and how, really good. Okay, Larry. Larry tells this story. I go, that's some story. All right, Mark, how about you? And so I really try and make sure I'm asking 1.3 questions. I am spending about 42 seconds just to keep things in balance in that room, because I just don't want to hurt anybody's feelings coming out of the gate.
My heart is full hearing that, because I wish more facilitators did that. I think that sometimes, I mean, when you even go listen to somebody speak, you want everybody to feel seen, and it's
Right.
really hard. It's really hard. And some people, Rob, take up a lot of energetic space, and you kind of have to, bring them back in. You think they're starting to fly your airline.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I'm the pilot, and you don't want to, not that you, but I'm the pilot of this airline. So you need to sort of rein them in. But then there's those people that you're really interested in and you think, ooh, I want to know what so and so's thinking. And you can kind of notice. And so those are the people I'm always curious about because oftentimes you could, Rob, in that moment, make that person's day. Like they finally, for the first time ever, they felt seen. And so I can tell, I mean, I know you, from working with you this way, but I can imagine the electricity that you must conjure when you do a workshop because that power to see other people is a superpower. It really is. And it's hard as a facilitator. I don't
Yeah,
know if
it
people
is.
realize it, how hard it is.
It's hard. Let me say one more question. I want to jump in the workbook, but to stay on that point, you mind just trainer to trainer real fast? I think people
Yeah.
might find this interesting in terms of you mentioned, and I'll give them a name. Sometimes I'll call them heroes or enlighteners, but it's somebody, and they mean no harm. This is not an aggressive act by an individual. It's just somebody who's so highly engaged that we're running into time issues. There may be a rolling of the eye a little bit. We have to control the situation without offending the individual. Let's you and me go back to back, all right? Tell me from you as a workshop leader how you try and subtly handle that. Then I'll throw an idea back at you, at least how I try and subtly handle it.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
I think when I was less experienced, and I'm not as experienced a speaker as you are, Rob, but I was so on point with trying to get through my agenda that I think that I was much more warrior-like when I gave my talks. And as I've gotten much more at ease with myself as a speaker, I've been much more flexible about thinking, okay, this is interesting. And, even bringing them in, gosh, you bring up a really great point. Can I come back to that? Even saying, gosh, I hear you. And that is such an incredible point. Let's put that in the issue bin and can we come back to it?
Yeah.
And then you said, then they feel seen and heard. Um, there are certainly times I've had them, I know you've had them, when somebody there's no way for you to jump in. The train's left the station. There you go. And it's just gently saying, gosh, there's so many things we're talking about here, and I wish we had time for all of them.
Right.
Thank you so much, so and so. I'm going to shelve it for now. And let's get back. But it's just really, I think, almost making the eye contact with that person. That's what I do. What do you do?
Yeah, there's a couple ways. First of all, love what you're doing there. I would actually physically park it. In other words, sometimes if you actually put that question that you don't really want to answer because it's going to take you into another module that doesn't come for 2 more hours, and see if you park it, at least you'll remember it. They feel heard. What I do is I have a rule of thumb, and I'll do this in 30 seconds or less. First rule of thumb is I'm trying to be careful not to overreact. In other words, some energy is good in the room. It sure is nice to ask an overhead question and know we've got somebody who's going to keep things from being too quiet here. But here's what I do. I will frequently, if it really starts to become chronic, I'll just look at somebody and say, something, and well, let's make it you, Andrea. I so appreciate this type of participation in a workshop. It's one of the kindest things you can do for an instructor. You know what? Andrea, you hang tight. I need this type of participation from the rest of you in this room. So, Andrea, you stay down for a little bit. Give me what I'm getting from Andrea. And the person tends to feel very empowered, really good, because a lot of times that's part of what's going on psychologically. I'm an opinion leader. Will you please acknowledge me and notice me? Well, I just gave it to you in a big time. And they'll tend to sit back and go, yeah, they got what they were looking for. They're the star of the show, but I can hear from others, and that's a move I'll make.
Ooh, can I put that in my little hip pocket? That's so smart.
Yeah, but
That is what we would say strategic, resourceful, and graceful, Rob. All of
well,
those things. I mean, that
well,
really is because you met them right where they needed to be met. I love that.
yeah, that's the bottom line. You can't, they can get offended easily. If you treat them improperly, they can become what we call snipers. I want to give them what they're looking for. And there you go. All right. I have monopolized my time on training issues. You brought up a moment ago masculine and feminine energies, and we sideswiped it. I want to go back there. Tell me why. Kind of explain that. Tell me why that's important in business, and just kind of go a little deeper into that, if you would. I know your book and your workbook does.
It does. And I really got interested about really, I talk about strategic, resourceful, and graceful leadership because I myself was a warrior for most of my life. I showed up as a warring warrior. I was going to slay it, go get it. And I think so many people think that they need to armor up to be effective as leaders. And when I went to coaching school to become a certified coach, I learned that actually, even though that warrior part of you is really fantastic, being um, assertive and visionary and structured and target focused, it's really great. But when I'm reactive, I show up as closed minded, confrontational, disconnected, and ego driven. And I didn't want to be that way anymore. So I got really curious, and those are the masculine sides of my leadership. Every man, woman, or however you identify has masculine leadership traits and feminine leadership traits. I started getting really curious about the feminine sides of leadership, like being attuned to emotional intelligence, what's going on in the room, cultivating, just like what you were talking about in that when you were dealing with that person that was taking up a lot of space in your workshop. That's a lot of feminine energy because you were reading that person, but you were and helping them to feel seen. You were receiving them, but you were also saying, I hear you, but we're going to go this way. And it's a very much softer way. There's more versatility, I think, in feminine leadership. And I got really curious about how can I bring more of this? There's vulnerability in feminine leadership. When you have a leader that says, I have to tell you all, I'm very anxious to share this news with you, but I'm going to share it anyway. I want to follow that leader. They're being truthful, they're being honest. And so it's really about integrating both our masculine doing kinds of leadership traits with our feminine being. How do you want to be? What kind of leader do you want to be? And in my book and in my workbook, I have something called the balance your response chart, which really invites you to think about, where am I? So at any given time. So conscious leaders really know where they are emotionally at any given time. And when we are reactive, I would say we are wounded or we're below the line. Maybe we're defensive, which is a masculine below the line leadership trait. Or maybe we're avoiding the issue, which is kind of a feminine, hiding from things or getting smaller, not wanting to be seen. That's a below the line feminine leadership trait. So I have a client that actually uses this chart before she goes into team meetings. And she says, who do I want to be today?
Hmm.
Which traits do I want to embody when I go in to meet with my team? And Rob, I have to tell you, before we came on the podcast, I got out my little chart and I thought, who do I want to be when I see Rob today? How do I want to show up? It's really an opportunity to choose again, to be the leader that elevates the energy of the room. Gosh, I want to be that. I'm not it every day, but if I can be the person or the leader or the friend or the spouse or the speaker that elevates the energy of the room, wow. Can you imagine if we all tried to do that? There would be
Yeah.
so much more harmony and cooperation and compassion.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want you to know it's a podcast, but no one saw my eyes bug out when you said, "Well, that was a feminine leadership trait, Rob." Not that that should be a big deal, but I remind you, I was raised by a Marine, And so I
Well,
twitched a little. And then as you got into it, I thought, of course, of course, of course.
but see, that's the interesting thing
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
because when I speak to men about this, like my husband, you, colleagues that I work with, they don't want to be in, they think, oh, I'm not going to have feminine leadership traits. And I'll say, well, you invited me onto your podcast. You're being a host. You're receptive, you're listening, you're curious, you're asking questions. Those are all feminine leadership traits. I
Yeah.
mean, think about it, Rob. The best negotiators, the best negotiators are both balanced between masculine leadership traits and feminine leadership traits because they have goals. They definitely know what they want, but they go into that negotiation receiving the people that they're negotiating with. They're curious, they're receptive, they create consensus. It's just smart, strategic, resourceful leadership. I mean, when you think about that, man, those are the leaders I want to follow because they have a conscious awareness about where am I right now. You may get triggered. I mean, I still get triggered and I have to think, ooh, okay, I could be triggered and I am triggered right now, but I'm going to choose again and catch myself, and I'm going to respond with this way. I mean, the best way when I get triggered, I instead of getting angry, I just get curious and I ask a question because I mean, anger is when we react, we're out of power. When we respond, we've taken our power back resourcefully, and
Yeah.
it's intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it becomes a question of reading the room a little bit.
And
And
that's
yeah,
that's emotional intelligence.
right.
I
Right.
mean, Rob, interestingly, I work with women and men, but a lot of the women that coaching clients I've had were so reluctant to share that like they could feel like they could go into the conference room and they could tell, oh my goodness, there's a lot of tension in here. They had the ability to read emotional intelligence. Not everybody has that superpower. And they were so reluctant to share their emotions. And I'd say, you've got something that other people don't have. So you're reading the room. That's being reading the room. So maybe we don't want to bring this topic up now. Maybe I need to talk to a few people behind the scenes and then bring it up and be more strategic about how we do that. But I think that more people need to read the room. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
is what I'm saying landing? I mean, when you do a workshop or a talk, you're reading the room. How is this content landing?
Oh,
And
not
maybe
only
I
that,
go
Andrea,
a different
but
way.
you've got
Yeah.
salespeople listening. And
Yes.
I want to remind them all that because we all forget that we do certain things. The moment you catch yourself saying, well, I wanted to sit here, or I wanted to meet here, or I wanted to do this because that's what makes me feel comfortable, you're already losing. It has nothing to do with what makes you feel comfortable. You might want to sit on that couch. Is that you have a social customer? Is that where they'd want you to sit? Is that the place they'd want to meet? I think we lose ourselves into we forget about it. But the mantra really is I'm kind of a chameleon, whether I'm training or selling. We read the room. And if it
Yeah.
requires facilitation, if it requires, I do a lot of training in New York. I think my more masculine side typically comes out there in a financial presentation to a hardcore New York group. You got to be real careful to go in there and say, well, I want to share and feel. They're not sharing and feeling. And I don't want to broad brush all of New York, but you get my point. It is reading the room and understanding that we have to be versatile. And it doesn't matter whether this is who you are, you're reacting to people around you.
Exactly. And I love, I mean, just what you explained, I started getting a stomach ache, and we've all been there. And you think, oh my goodness,
Yeah. Yeah.
how
Yeah.
am I going to recover from this? What am I
Yeah.
going to do?
Yeah. Mm. Absolutely. And one thing I was going through your workbook. I appreciate you sending it to me. And I don't always go through everybody's book, but before we even went on, we started recording our podcast, Andrea already knows me enough where she said, I think the trainer and Rob would be curious. And I absolutely was, because what I like about it, and I wish more books would have at least an element of this, is that there are interactive modules in there that we interact with the material. I think in a perfect world, our books should be more interactive than they are, but in a workbook, you're not going to have to look real hard. I like that part of it. And I like the exercises that are in there. I like being able to measure what I'm doing. I'm not obsessed on doing it right. I'm obsessed on knowing whether I did do it right or did it wrong. Do I understand this concept? And when we just read a book, a lot of times we have no idea whether what just sunk in, what we really taking with us. You perform and you implement you interact with the book. You do exercises that can measure where you are. Then we get to implementation. Then we know where we're going. So I really applaud that. Was that challenging for you to kind of lay that out that way?
Um, I'm so glad to hear that. I really, my goal for this really, Rob, was to help people integrate
Mm-hmm.
aim, claim, and reframe into their lives, because what works for Rob doesn't work for everybody. And my hope, and my publisher and my editor and I were talking about what is this going to look like, he said, we got to have this workbook stand on its own. It's got to stand on its own. People have got to be able to pick it up and use it. Like, let's say that we talked about feedback. What if you had a bad review? You had a review from your boss, and it was, you just were just crushed about it. There's a section we could go through and say, okay, I'm going to run through these prompts and really kind of think about this feedback that I'm getting. What does it tell me? And how can I use it? There's a whole section on inner critic that you can go through. There's a section on healing from conflict. I mean, from years ago, we carry interpersonal conflict with us for decades and drag it around in trucks behind us. And if you can harvest learning from that and actually heal from it, and there's all sorts of things in there that can help you to sort of move past it, I think, and understand, why was that so hard for me at that time?
Yeah.
My hope is that people will use this workbook again and again and again, Rob, to really be more conscious in how they live their lives, and live more closer to their core beliefs. Because when we have dissonant experiences, when something doesn't sit right with us, it's because a core value was trumped. I mean, core values are the personal and intimate and internal barometers of what's important to us and what isn't. And what's important to you when you're 25 is different than when you're 45 or 65. And so, as we go through life, we change, our values change. And so it's really, it's just introspective work, and it's interesting. And someone said to me, can I write in it? And I said, sure, you can write in it, but you might just want to take a notebook out because you might want to use it again and again. That's my hope. I mean, there's no failure. I
Right.
mean, it's experimentation, and that's what I hope. I mean, you can tell I get so excited
Yeah.
because it's about the reader, and that's why I'm so excited, because this is a chance for readers to really take their power back in a really resourceful, strategic way,
Yeah.
and it's fun
Right.
if you choose to do it.
Yep. Yep. Well, and in a very short sentence, there's reading it and there's owning it. And when you interact and you do some of the things that you're putting in that workbook, now you're going to own it. So do you want to hear about it, or do you want to actually utilize it in your day-to-day activities? I think that's what a workbook should do. That's what a workshop does. And funny, not necessarily what a keynote does, but it's what a workshop does. A keynote is opens the door. It's almost like the introduction of the book. I'm going to tell you all about this book. We're not really going to be able to go through the name, claim, and reframe model, but I'm going to give you the 360 on it. But when you go through a workbook or a workshop, now you're saying, okay, that was interesting. Now I'd actually like to learn it so I can use it when I, in life. And I think that's where we're going. And I appreciate it because, as I said, the trainer in me just loves it. Could you do one thing? And we're coming down the home stretch, but I know everyone listened to the first podcast and memorized the entire model. But one of the things I remember, and as I said, I've done over 350 podcasts. I vividly remember your podcast. One of the things I challenged you with was I said, I know there's multiple steps here, but I want to see how nimble you are. I want you to just give us that introduction. Can you, in a nimble manner, I'm challenging you, kind of give everybody a sense of what that model looks like. And I don't really have a watch on you, but I'm gonna like a play clock in sports. I'm giving you I've got you on the communication shot clock on this one. Let's see how you can do it. All right, go.
Name, claim, and reign and reframe is about naming the source of your emotional triggers. Why am I reacting to this challenge instead of responding to it? Claiming resonant actions that align with your core beliefs. What actions can bring me back in integrity with myself? And then reframing your mindset so you can separate your ego and be strategic and visionary. What new perspectives or learning can I harvest to match my goals for the future? And that's name, claim, and reframe.
Wow. You see, you've had some ring work. And hats off to you. You know what great speakers and trainers do. We sometimes the people say, I've heard some of this, and I'll always say, yeah, but when you watch a great speaker or a great trainer, you'll hear them be able to succinctly communicate their message. That can take years to do. Uh, and we make it look easy. We make it look simple. That's part of the gift. But that's the challenge. And so it's nice. If this wasn't a workbook off that other book, you'd be still getting some ring work on that one. but well done on that. All right. We're kind of hitting up the end of the podcast. I really I could talk to you for another hour. But I wish you a ton of luck. How about one more question? Maybe in terms of what you've seen, and when people begin to get their eyes opened up and get that aha moment, what do you think is one of the biggest misunderstandings that most people have? We already got one from Rob. I take my feedback a little too seriously, and maybe I'm channeling what I see in a training program and forgetting that this isn't a training program, Rob. This is your work, and people are really trying to. So there was a misunderstanding I have. What do you see as one of the misunderstandings that surrounds this particular, topic / passion of yours?
Well, I think that leadership, resourceful leadership is an inside job. It is. And it means that you have the skills to manage your emotions, not let your emotions manage you. And I think that when leaders get curious about how they lead and learn really from, their triggers, when I understand what my triggers are, then I really understand the things that hurt me and the things that, where I'm going to lose my power. If I can get on top of those things and be more introspective, then I can really be a better leader because I'll catch it before it happens. And then I can choose again to be more resourceful and strategic. And I would say graceful. And I think it calls in harmony. The best leaders have conscious awareness of where they are at any moment. And I think that this is an opportunity for people to be more conscious. And that's what leadership coaching and life coaching is. But you have to want to do the work, and it's hard work. It is.
Yeah. And you had me at curious. I think curious translates to authentic or authenticity. And when you're around a leader or an individual that is truly authentically curious in what you're up to, and sometimes that's the job you're doing, and sometimes that's just the life that you're living. That is, you've got one heck of a good manager or a good leader
Yes, yes.
that's in front of
Because
you.
there's always a different way to do things.
Yeah.
There's always I love, the people that I've worked for that have asked questions and listened. Those are the people that I admired, and I want to be that person.
Yeah.
Because there's always a different way to go about it. And you might learn something. I mean, it's never too late to learn something new, how to do something. And so I think this work really encourages that curiosity, and that sometimes, interesting mistakes can be the lifesaver, because it gives you a perspective you hadn't thought about. Oh, I mean, I think mistakes are sometimes a divine gift. And so not to be afraid to make mistakes as leaders and to apologize. Gosh, I'm sorry, that was not the best thing. That was probably not the best strategy. And I'm going to take ownership for that. Man, I want to follow that leader that takes ownership,
Yeah,
because we're
I
all
like that parent
sorry.
too, by the way. It's one of the greatest
Yes.
parenting lessons I ever learned was to look my kid in the eyes. And I don't mean a 15-year-old. I mean a 7-year-old. Okay. I mean a child that's just beginning to understand your parenting tendencies. 3, 4, 5 doesn't really count, in my opinion. Whatever I say is probably going to go, but to look them in the eye and say, I didn't get that one right. I get them, and give me some time on these, because I'll figure it out and let them know that you're human. I found great managers. Just a Rob thing, by the way. If you want to know if you have a great manager, meet the family. If that is a fully functioning family and a very healthy family, most likely you've got a good manager. It's just a little Rob's rule. If it's a very dysfunctional family, and that's unfortunate, you're probably in some trouble. Just gonna
Wow.
throw that out there.
This is the best. I get all these little, I'm gonna put that in my hip pocket too, Rob. Thank you.
Watch. All right. The book is called Name, Claim, and Reframe Workbook, your companion guide to a well-lived life. It's just hitting the shelves now. It's fresh off, just came out April 30th. And grab yourself a copy. You've just heard the author. And one other thing, you hear the passion in her voice. It's impossible for an author that has passion on a topic not to translate that into their writing. So you're going to get a good passionate read out of that. I appreciate my copy. The reason why I don't get many copies is because I don't want them. I like to give a verified review on Amazon. So I'm actually going to give this one away. Well, I'm going to keep this one because you signed it to me, but I'm going to get another one and I'm going to give that to one of my trainer friends over here. Just a huge congratulations to you. It takes work to write books, folks, and this is this. I just appreciate any book that's really trying to get people to do what's being taught. How do people get a hold of you, Andrea?
I am at AndreaDeWittAdvisors.com.
It's
And
easy.
my book is available anywhere books are sold.
How about LinkedIn people? Can people look you up on LinkedIn? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Please do connect with me. And also, I like feedback. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Andrea Mine, Mein DeWitt. And do reach out to me because
Right.
you
If you
heard it.
reach out to me, remember I'm sort of I'm a work in progress on feedback. But I'm trying. I went from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent on this conversation. So thank you for that. Always nice seeing you again. Really enjoyed the talk. You two-timer, you. And I wish you nothing but success with this book. Keep going and just take that passion of yours and get out there and let people hear it. It's real, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure as well. All right, folks, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.